Uncensored is the home of big debates. Here are some of our favourite head-to-heads from the year so far. And remember, hang on. A whole fleet of tech billionaires have kissed the Trump ring and bought the president's counsel in the process. Many are celebrating all this as a massive victory for red-blooded American capitalism, with the smartest and most successful people finally let loose on an incompetent government. Others fret about cash for access and a punishing regime of inflationary tariffs on products for the poor and massive tax cuts for the rich. They include the millionaire comedian Bill Burr, who launched a blistering attack on billionaires in a podcast this week.
Dude, this is so... The amount of people that are struggling out there because of these fucking billionaires. And they got us all arguing liberal and conservative. We got to stop doing that. Like, I am so tired of hearing about people going to bed worried about what's going to happen next week. There is so much fucking money in this country. And there's so much work being done, you know. And if you work a full fucking week at a job, you should be able to pay your fucking rent. You shouldn't have to go out and get another fucking job and still be struggling. It's bad for the country. Because then the kids don't see their parents and they're not getting the upbringing that they need. It's so fucking... These fucking billionaires, they need to be put down. You know, like fucking rabid dogs. They're like rabid with fucking greed and just going out and just dividing everybody. You know, just the fucking epitome of this time right now. Like how divisive we are.
And he goes on. It's a spectacular rant, I have to say, and it resonated a lot with people. So does this mean that we're facing the dawn of a winning new brand of economic populism on the left? Should regular working voters be worried about a billionaire power grab? Which is exactly what America voted for and what it needs. We're going to debate all this. This is exciting, this double act. It's the one I never thought we'd ever be able to get in the studio. Legendary host of the Rubin Report, Dave Rubin, and up against the author of the Sunday Times bestseller, #1 bestseller, The Trading Game, and host of the Gary's Economics podcast, Gary Stevenson. Well, welcome to both of you. Not natural bedfellows, but in a way, both have very strong views about this same issue, which reflect how people are split about this, right? I want to start with you, Gary. It's an incredible book. It's sold buckets of copies, in #1 with the paperback. On the front, it says, an unforgettable story of greed, financial madness, and moral decay. Now, you went from a council estate, working class council estate in Ilford in Essex, sort of east of London for Americans. You rose to become Citibank's most profitable trader in the world, but you grew increasingly disgusted by what you saw as the blatant inequality of the system that you were gaming. You had a breakdown, and then you quit. And you're now an avid anti-inequality campaigner. You think there are fundamental changes required in the system, centered around redistribution of wealth and resource, or the whole thing will collapse. So, starting with you, how much did that resonate with you, what Bill Burr was saying?
Well, you know, I come from a poor background. I come from a poor background in East London. My friends and my family still live in that background. So, you know, these stories of mum skipping meals so the kids can eat, people not being able to put the heating on in the winter, that's common. That's really, really, and I think it's important that we say that in spaces like these, because now I exist in these media spaces, and I've been to these fancy universities, I've worked in the banks. A lot of wealthy people don't see that's happening. You know, in this country, I'm talking to you right now, half the country struggles to simultaneously feed the kids and turn the heating on. That's the truth, and I know it's getting that way in America as well, so of course it resonates with me, you know. Of course it resonates with me. The poverty is out of control.
I mean, Dave, the argument will be, well, I'll let you espouse the argument you want to espouse, but one of the big arguments, of course, is that what billionaires like Elon Musk have done, for example, is they build tremendous businesses which generate tremendous amount of jobs for people to then earn good money and do exactly what a lot of people here can't afford to do. So therefore, they can be a force for good albeit obviously you're going to get bad apples. How do you see it?
Sure. Well, first, let me jump to the part that I agree with, which is that, of course, there is inequality. And would we all like to see poor people have more? And is it possible that some people have, quote unquote, too much? It's hard to agree what that might be, but I'm sympathetic to that argument for sure. And that's in my country, and that's across the pond right here. That's number one. The question really is the method that is going to free the most people and free the markets and allow people to flourish. I believe in free market capitalism. I want there to be as much competition as possible. I don't have a problem with billionaires because generally speaking, billionaires have built things. I mean, the idea that Elon Musk is devoting this amount of time to working for the government to help make sure that the government is more efficient is pretty spectacular. If I could jump back to the Bill Burr clip for just a moment, I know Bill a little bit. We've traveled in some of the same circles. I mean, he's surrounded by all millionaires. It used to be that Bernie Sanders was always complaining about millionaires. Then Bernie Sanders became a millionaire and he started complaining about billionaires. The idea that if you just somehow magically took out, well, he also made a violent threat there, but let's put that aside for a moment. But if you somehow took these people out, or if you took 10 billionaires and you took all of Jeff Bezos' money and you took all of Peter Thiel's money and Mark Zuckerberg, et cetera, you took all of their money and you redistributed it throughout the system, that somehow 3 years later things would be better, I think is a completely faulty argument. There's way more things as it pertains to education and teaching people proper value of money and what economics really is that I think is way more important than just demonizing the billionaire class or any other class. Class warfare does not work and will ultimately lead to kind of what his bad joke was about, which was violence against these people.
I was a trader for a long time, and I worked with a much older trader. In the book, he's called JB. He had a good quote about these kinds of opinions. He said, opinions are like arseholes. Everybody's got one. Now listen, I don't get paid to have opinions, okay? I was one of the best paid and most successful traders in the world, for one of the biggest banks in the world. I put bets, I place bets. And I've been betting for 14 years that the working class in my country and the working class in your country will collapse into desperate, worsening poverty year after year. I'm a multimillionaire from doing that, from betting on that. Traders message me every day. They say what's going to happen. I say it's going to get worse. I've been betting on it since the beginning of COVID. I've made millions on it. All the best traders know. Let me explain to you how economics works, all right? You guys work in media, all right? I work for Citibank. You call up Citibank and you say, I want an opinion on what's going to happen to the economy. They pay me £2 million a year. Did they give me the phone? No, they don't. Kids like me don't get the phone. We get the money, okay? I shouldn't be here. Doesn't make no sense for me to have a YouTube channel. Doesn't make no sense for me to be here. I got paid millions of dollars a year to bet on the collapse of your working class, okay? I've walked away to come here on this show for free because I want to tell the public, the American people, this gets worse. This gets worse. Well, I'm not just saying it, I'm betting on it.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
So explain what you mean. So when you say you've been betting on it,
okay, right. So I started
explain to people who don't know the system.
I started working in 2008, which, as you all know, is the Lehman crisis.
Right.
The collapse of the economy. And my job
Too big to fail.
My job was betting on interest rates. As you'll know, in 2008, all the interest rates went to zero. Then my job is when will the interest rates come back up, which is kind of a proxy for when will the economy recover. I'll give you a history lesson on it, right? In 2008, everybody said 2009. In 2009, they said 2010. In 2010, they said 2011. Every single year, up until 2020, they said rates will recover next year, until 2020, when they finally said rates will stay zero forever. We're bad at this. We're bad at this, okay? I'm fucking good at this, all right? Why did interest rates not recover after 2008? Because people weren't spending money. Zero interest rates are supposed to get people spending. Why did zero interest rates not get people spending? I had the radical idea of going out and asking people, what do you think people say when I ask them, why aren't you spending more money? What do you think people say?
They're not spending more money because they probably don't have more money.
Yeah, and when I looked at their financial situations, what I saw, this is in early 2010s, I was in my mid-20s, I saw a generation of people, my parents' generation, who owned property, and another generation of people, their kids, my generation, who will never own property. The middle class are losing their homes, the middle class are losing their wealth. Where is that wealth going? Where is that wealth
And your
going?
argument is it's going just to the super rich.
Where else?
So they're getting. So Dave, I mean.
Well, I think it's important to make a distinction that first off, what's happening in your country and our country are not exactly the same, but largely over the last decade, until the last month where we now have Donald Trump, both of our countries have been going in the direction of more big government, more regulation, more of the middle management nonsense that Elon Musk is uncovering every day. So I would be for removing as much of that as possible, removing as much of the waste. I mean, we are now seeing with USAID and everything else that Elon is uncovering with Doge, that the amount of waste and absolute fraud, and I would say criminal negligence in the system is a huge root of it. So I agree.
Yeah.
So again, I agree with some of the symptoms you're talking about for sure. The question is the diagnosis. So how do you then say to the person that can't afford the house, how do you afford a house? Well, one way you might want to do it is I would, if I was in charge of your country or mine, I would lower taxes for everybody. I would do a flat tax for everybody. Make sure, so whether you're a billionaire or whether you make $100,000 or 75 grand, whatever it might be, you're going to pay whatever the number is. We can all agree on the number. Let's say it's 10%. The billionaire is still paying way more in taxes. But this type of class warfare that we've been caught up in, where the common phrase always is, well, they have to pay their fair share. Well, who decides what the fair share is? And guess what? Someone will always want more of your money.
Gareth?
Listen, I don't like opinions. I'm not really interested in opinions. I make predictions. What you've said you want is what you're going to get, right? Because this is the policy of the new government. Do you think living standards for your average working class American are going to improve?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, that's good. Put this on YouTube. Put this on YouTube because I'll call back.
Why are you convinced they won't?
Listen, I've got a video.
Because Trump in his first 3 years before the pandemic, that was happening.
Yes, absolutely it was.
So why can't he do it again?
I've got a video, June 2020, beginning of COVID, right at the beginning of COVID, okay? What's the total US government deficit now since the beginning of COVID? Do you know? It's $13 trillion, okay? That's $40,000 for every single man, woman, and child in the entire country of the United States of America. Every single man, even the babies, all right? So if you're out there watching and you're not $40,000 richer now, somebody's got your $40,000, okay? Who? Who's got that money now? So the most amazing thing I've ever seen at the beginning of COVID, we all knew governments across the world were going to give these unbelievable, enormous amounts of money out. The UK number is just over £1 trillion, by the way. These enormous amounts of money being given out. Nobody asked the question, who's going to end up with that money? Nobody. This is $40,000 for every... Imagine if the government came and took $40,000 from everyone in the country. And gave it to somebody. Nobody did the analysis. I did the analysis.
Can you point, if you know your history, can you point to a period in UK history, for example, where massively punishing rich people by massively taxing them has actually benefited the country?
Listen,
because I can't really.
My dad was born in 57. He worked for the post office, Royal Mail, 35 years. Never once earned more than the average wage in the country. He was able to buy a house, support a family. My parents are retired now. They own their own property. They're financially secure. That's not possible now. He lived in an era where the top rate of tax was much, much, much higher. The 50s, the 60s, the 70s in the UK, in the US, the top rate of tax on large estates was significantly higher. And in that time period, it's not a coincidence, ordinary people could afford to buy houses. They could afford to... Listen, this is not normal, okay? Read your history, right? You read Charles Dickens? In this country we're talking in right now, 150 years ago, ordinary men and women lived in desperate poverty, okay? That's going to happen again. That is what, it's not normal.
Hold on, but making the argument that 40 or 50 years ago the tax rates were higher and somehow that made things better. First off, times change. The giant middle bureaucratic state that Donald Trump is constantly fighting was not nearly as big 50 years ago. So again, I'm talking about this from an American perspective. As we're uncovering this waste, the idea that, only if we took 10% more or 20% more from this person or that person, I don't think makes sense. As it pertains to COVID, I would say, yes, COVID was a giant wealth transfer from the poor to the rich. I was against lockdowns. I was against putting people out of work. I was against virtually all of the regulations after 2 weeks to slow the spread. So again, that's got giant government programs creating the conditions that create all of the economic and social and cultural problems that we have. So the solution to that, I think, is exactly what we have seen for the last month, which is let's deregulate, let's figure out where the fraud is, let's give people more of a chance. We can deregulate the banks so that they're willing to loan again, so that people can buy houses again. Let's stop printing money so interest rates go down and inflation goes down so that people can actually get loans, so that America loans right now are something like 6-7%. It's very hard to buy a house at that rate. When I bought my house only a couple of years ago, it was around 2.9%. Well, then it's valuable because, okay, you're going to pay a little penalty and hopefully your house goes up over time. So just removing the government and the regulations and the waste, that to me is the answer, not just I need that guy's money and I really would like it.
Could I ask a question? You've accepted there that during COVID, there was a massive transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich, and all the statistics support that. After COVID, after lockdowns, after reopening, we know there's been a massive transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich. We then saw a massive fall in living standards for the middle class and for the poor. Do you think those two things are connected?
From an American perspective, I would say those things are largely connected because they decided to print money relentlessly. That's what we did. We did the Inflation Reduction Act, which was actually an inflation increase act.
The average increase in US billionaires' wealth in the first year of COVID was more than 100%, doubling of wealth. What's the US GDP rate of growth? 3%, 4%?
Top of my head, I don't know.
At what rate does a billionaire's wealth increase? These guys doubled in 1 year.
But wasn't that maybe?
But
But Gary, isn't that a bit disingenuous? Because the reason their wealth increased so exponentially in that period was just because stock prices flew up, right?
I don't think it's just that.
Wasn't that how they accrued the extra wealth?
I've got a video explaining exactly this, all right? Listen, you lock down the economy, okay? Ordinary family, my parents, how much their expenses decrease.
But are you arguing that the billionaires locked down the economy? I mean, I knew.
No, not all. I'm just trying to explain what happened, all right? You lock down the economy, okay? My parents, how much is their expenditure for? Basically nothing. Basically nothing, because their expenditure is entirely rent, mortgage, food, bills. Like, that's poor people's expenditure.
Right.
Whose expenditure falls during COVID?
The people who have, normally would go out and spend a lot of money.
People who have a lot of luxury spending.
They weren't spending,
non-essential
they were
spending,
accumulating more money.
So if you ban luxury spending and you replace it with, as you say, government printed money, what's going to happen? That printed money is going to go to people who work in the service sector. They're going to use it to pay their bills. It's going to go to the rich people who own the corporations, who own the houses, who own the debt, and they can't spend it. What you have is basically a massive cash injection from the government through the poor to the rich. Listen, we saw the biggest and fastest ever transfer of wealth and increase in inequality in the history of our nations, and it was immediately followed by an inflationary crisis and a collapsing cost of living. This is the clearest proof you will ever need. You don't need me, somebody who's made millions of pounds betting on this. The clearest proof you will ever need of the absolutely bloody obvious fact that if you massively increase inequality, you will decrease living standards for working people.
Well, it seems to me that the part we're agreeing on is that we all seem to agree that giant government spending and giant government control over the economy and over our lives ultimately is bad. I don't blame...
Yeah, I don't really see the correlation between that reality, which we can all agree to, and the fact that it's the billionaires' fault for getting richer.
Exactly.
When actually a lot of that wealth was just accrued from...
Listen, I'm not Mahatma Gandhi, I'm not Mother Teresa, I'm not a moral philosopher. I'm one of the best economists in the fucking world at this, okay? I'm here to tell you what's happening. If you massively increase inequality, these guys, they don't just sit on that $10 trillion. They don't just sit on it. They use that to buy assets. They buy the assets that ordinary American working families need. The reason why American families, their kids can't afford homes is because they're now competing with a billionaire class that is $10 trillion richer. $10 trillion, that's $40,000 for every American man, woman, and child.
Well, I would say that even if we were to take that premise as true, so I'll go with you on the premise, the fault would not lie within the billionaire doing something that is right. So if we're in agreement on that, I think that's positive.
But where does the poverty lie?
So then the issue really is, what would you want a competent government to do? And I think what you would want a competent government to do is make sure that there is as little waste as possible, that we're not spending money on trans comic books in Peru, which is literally what we're finding out right now. And we're going to perhaps audit the Fed and find out where the trillions of dollars to Ukraine went and everything else. And if we have a proper accounting, the same way you run your household and anyone would run their business, then we could probably address some of these issues.
Well, we'll return now to the vexed debate about US involvement, Israeli influence, and the moral case for war on Tehran. We've seen a lot of Dave Smith on Uncensored recently. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Dave's always welcome here. He's back for another debate today because his co-panelist, while discussing debate ideas with our producers, said these words: "It has to be Dave Smith. The man has so much influence and he's so wrong on every level. The world needs to understand why every one of his points is garbage." So I may as well take the next hour off. But joining me for what I think will be a fascinating discussion on an imperative subject, Elika Labon, the Iranian-American attorney and activist, and Dave Smith, libertarian commentator and the host of Part of the Problem. Let me just start, before we go any further, Elika, just with a response to my interview there with Professor Izadi in Tehran, which was actually reasonably, civilized, normal, until the end, when he brazenly said he was proud of what Hamas did on October the 7th. And at that point, I realized he was a complete lunatic. But what did you feel listening to it?
I'm glad the world's finally realizing what we've been knowing for the past 46 years. But ultimately, you just have to look at their talking points and realize the ridiculous hypocrisy of it. Wasn't his whole thing that Palestinians have been oppressed and therefore it is their moral obligation and everyone's moral obligation to attack Israel? Well, by that same logic, what they're doing to Iranian people, lynching them, torturing them, blinding them, then by that logic, the entire world should be bombing Iran right now. So how can you speak out of both sides of your mouth saying that this type of oppression justifies not just military intervention, but terrorism? But you don't think anything should happen to you while you're doing this to your own people. And that's how you know it's a bluff. That's how you know it was never about Palestinian people. It was never about oppression. These are not people who care about oppression. These are the enforcers of oppression who weaponize oppression in order to gain legitimacy in their attacks on Israel.
Dave, we're going to come to the main debate in a few moments, but just your reaction to that interview with Professor Izadi, because like I say, it was like a game of two halves, right? Where for most of it, he seemed perfectly reasonable, really, albeit it wouldn't be arguments I would put forward or agree with, but I could understand where he was coming from and he seemed quite reasonable. And then right at the end, I mean, for somebody just to, on camera, say they were proud of what Hamas did on October the 7th, what was your reaction to that?
Very similar to yours. I thought there were a lot of reasonable things said up until that point. But of course, I think this isn't that uncommon. Regimes and supporters of regimes are often guilty of just the most outrageous hypocrisy. And you think of historical examples like Joseph Stalin used to put out propaganda about how horribly racist America was and how Jim Crow was terrible and they treated the black people so terrible in the United States of America, which it was true. But what a hypocrite for Joseph Stalin to be pretending like he was concerned with human rights as he, oversaw the gulags and stuff like that. And so I think, listen, the claim that Hamas and Hezbollah have never engaged in terrorism is just ridiculous and stupid. And, but then again, I would say, I also think the claim that the IDF has never engaged in terrorism is kind of equally ridiculous. And so, it is in a sense, the hypocrisy of all of the regimes allows somebody like that to point out your hypocrisy, to say, oh yeah, Piers, well, you're criticizing Iran, saying that they're a state sponsor of terrorism as a citizen of a government that is sponsoring Israel's destruction of Gaza. And so again, there's awful, all of this is just horrible. And there's awful hypocrisy all around. I think there were some fair points that he made in there, but yeah, I mean, listen, October 7th, and even if you want to go with the idea that there was friendly fire or even some type of Hannibal directive issued, there's been people who have done deep dives into this, and there is some evidence that some people died that way, but there's just no question that Hamas crossed the border and killed a lot of innocent people. And as I've been saying to you since I've been on your show, Piers, I just think it's horrible when people downplay that, and it does nothing but undercut their.
Yeah, I agree. I
argument.
mean, if all you do is focus purely on the GoPro footage that Hamas broadcast to the world, if that's all you do, you see exactly the horror that they perpetrated. All right, Elika, you wanted to come on, but specifically with Dave Smith, you think he's wrong about absolutely everything. So just outline your main complaints about Dave Smith.
I don't have an outline, but I think I can just go off of everything that he says. In this example, you correctly pointed out what the Soviet Union was doing. You correctly pointed out that they would use these kernel of truths as part of their disinformation campaigns. But the question is, what were their disinformation campaigns rooted in? Well, we know what the entire, communist agenda was, and that was demoralization of the West, in order to sort of gain this traction internally within the West so that they would overthrow their own government. So the whole point of Soviet disinformation and ideological subversion was to convince people that the West and Israel was the source of all evil in the world. All of the KGB defectors have said the same thing. Yuri Bezmenov, Mikhail Pachepa. But the way they talk about how this is achieved, they talk about demoralization. And demoralization is the point where you can no longer tell truth from fiction. You can no longer tell right from wrong. And what happens when you reach that stage? You start making moral equivalencies between liberal democracies and terrorists and autocrats. So when you say there, yes, I do see that the Islamic Republic are terrorists, but I don't see how other liberal democracies are not terrorists as well. That is exactly the ideological subversion which you correctly identified, but don't see how it's a part of your own talking points.
Dave?
No, that's just a talking point yourself there. I mean, it's just not true. I know that the defenders of Israel often like to use this term moral equivalency, but it's just made up and doesn't apply to what I'm saying at all. I mean, if I were to say that I in no way ever said that the society of Iran is identical to the society of Israel, or that the people or the citizens of that country both enjoy the same amount of liberty. I've never said there are massive differences. Listen, I would say that American society, certainly within America, was far superior to Iraqi society under Saddam Hussein. But you can say that and also say that George W. Bush launched an illegal war in Iraq. These things aren't contradictory at all. And so what I'm talking about is, let me finish. What I'm talking about here is that the IDF is committing acts of terrorism. And so you can say it doesn't count when a government does it, but there's no objective moral standard to that. So I'm not making an equivalency between anything. I'm just pointing out that these two groups both have committed terrorism. And so in the same sense that you could point out how two people have both committed the same crime, that is not the same as saying those two people are identical in every way.
So when you... Yeah, so you are drawing these moral equivalencies and you're doing exactly that. You're saying, I'm just saying, how is the IDF different to Hamas? How is the IDF different to the Islamic Republic?
I didn't say that. No, you're saying that. There are, I could list off right now. Hold on. Because you're starting with completely strawmanning my position. So let's just, before you just argue, hold on. So before you argue with what you made up, instead of arguing with what I'm saying, I could name 1,000 differences between Hamas and the IDF. I'm not saying there's no difference between them.
Clarify what you're saying.
I don't think it could be any clearer. I'm saying they both commit horrific acts. Both kill innocent people.
You have said now, and you've said online on Twitter when you were debating people, you asked this exact question, which is exactly what a demoralized person would ask. How is this different to that? How is Israel doing this different to that? Now, let me just start by saying,
hold on. This is like a basic IQ test. I could say, how is this act different from this act? That's not saying how is this entity identical to this other entity. The point is that targeting innocent. Sure.
It's exactly like saying, how is it different between a cop and a robber when they're both pointing guns at each other and they're both making each other feel threatened? Isn't that the exact same thing? Yes, sure, it is the exact same act, but it is a different motivation. Okay, that's what the difference is. Because when you have a regime like the Islamic Republic or Hamas, that's literal inception and existence is based on the destruction of Israel and death to America, and basically just killing everybody who disagrees with their ideology, and another entity whose focus is on protecting its people. Yes, the actions may look the same. And in fact, the actions may be just as wrong as each other. They may be just as brutal and terroristic as each other, but the motivation is different. And to be demoralized means to not understand that.
Hang on a second. All right, let me jump in there, because actually, what difference does it make to the innocent civilians who are...
Doesn't make a difference.
Well, hang on. What difference does it make to innocent civilians who are killed? Whether one has a better, motivation for doing it. Because my problem with what Israel's doing in Gaza is that in direct contrast to what it did in Lebanon with Hezbollah, in direct contrast to what it did in Iran, both very precise, very targeted, very successful operations, minimal civilian casualties. In Gaza, in Gaza, the strategy has been completely different. It's been a strategy of sort of nihilism, where they just destroy everything in Gaza. Almost every hospital is either now... Well, hang on, let me finish. Is either destroyed or damaged in some way. We know this actually because we have to listen to British doctors who've come out and told everybody what is actually going on there, because, of course, international journalists are still banned by the IDF, even though they were allowed in previous conflicts in Gaza. They're not allowed in to verify anything in this one, which I find very suspicious. But here's my point, Elika. I defended Israel's right to defend itself after October the 7th, not least because the Hamas spokesman went public almost immediately and said, we want to keep doing this. So I completely understand Israel's not just a need or a right, but a duty to defend its people. However, what we've seen in the last few months, with a 3-month blockade of starvation of already war-torn, impoverished people, and then this constant bombardment, including in the last 6 weeks, endless bombardments of people who are desperately lining up to get food. Now, they are dying, it seems very mysteriously. The IDF says we shot in the air as warnings. Sometimes they use other language, which means they may have shot towards people they saw as a threat, or they are now investigating what happened. I read out earlier in a previous debate about this, all the different times this has happened in the last 6 weeks. It's endless. And the idea that the IDF are not killing people in this way, when everybody else involved says they are, is ridiculous. So the point I think Dave is making, quite straightforwardly, is that what the IDF's been doing in the last 3 months, to me, crosses any line of self-defense and could absolutely be categorized as terrorizing the innocent people of Gaza. Now, it doesn't mean they're not in their heads going, they're going after Hamas. Their motivation is, we want to kill the bad guys. But they have lost all sense of proportion, and they are now behaving in a way that if other people were doing it to them, they would categorize as terrorism.
Okay, so let me just answer you in 2 points. First of all, let me ask you this question. If Hamas was entirely separated from the civilian population, let's say it was totally down north and everyone else, up north and everyone else was down south, do you think that we'd see these civilian casualties?
But no enemy in modern warfare has ever been entirely separated from civilian populations. It's for the birds. It doesn't happen. My brother and my brother-in-law were both army colonels, right? It's for the birds. This idea you get some clean war where civilians are nowhere near any of it, it doesn't really happen ever.
Yes, it does happen, because you just used the example of Iran. You saw
Give me an example where no civilians have been killed in modern warfare.
It's not no civilians, it's the amount of civilians.
Right.
And it is the fact that Hamas, it doesn't just embed itself, it embeds its
But there are as
weaponry.
many civilians in Lebanon. In fact, there are more civilians in Lebanon than there are in Gaza. How was it that Mossad was able to target 3,000 members of Hezbollah with a pager device that exploded? But in Gaza, the only way to deal with it, apparently, same situation. In Lebanon, Hezbollah live amongst civilians. The only way they can apparently do it in Gaza is to obliterate Gaza and kill tens of thousands of civilians as they go after Hamas. I don't understand the difference.
Okay, let me answer the question and then you'll understand. What you're doing right now is you're not just legitimizing Hamas's strategy, you are encouraging it.
No, I'm
because
not.
the whole...
When did I encourage it?
Okay, well, let me explain.
Elika,
and then
you know
you'll
people
understand.
are listening to this, right? I mean, they know what I've said.
Piers, if you let me finish my sentence and then at the end of it, you can tell me if you agree. Should we agree on that?
Sure.
Okay. When Hamas intentionally embeds itself amongst civilian populations, the whole point of that strategy is that there'll be so much civilian casualties that the world will look at Israel and say, what an abhorrent pariah state that has lost all legitimacy. Okay, so let me finish. So every time the world does that, every time the world reacts in that way, it reinforces Hamas's behavior because it tells them this works. So in this moment that you're saying this, you are encouraging Hamas to keep doing that.
So we shouldn't talk about the 50, 60, 70,000 civilians.
No, you should
or however many. We don't actually know how many have been killed. We know we believe 70,000 have been killed, of which perhaps 25 to 30,000 are Hamas. We don't know, because no one can ever give me actual figures.
You should talk about it, and you should frame it within the context of, look how much destruction there is when terrorists embed themselves in civilian populations,
All right,
which
Dave,
just
let me get Dave to respond. Let me get Dave to respond. I've been talking too much.
Listen, this is just we should talk about it, but only in the framework that it's not the fault of the people who are dropping the bombs on the innocent people or shooting the people who are the ones. Hey, you know what? You just asked. You just had. Excuse me. You just had your whole thing about let you finish and then you can respond to that. So why don't we do the same? I know.
And you stopped me when you were being
strawmanned. You opened by saying that Piers. You got interrupted when you said Piers was running cover for Hamas by pointing out that Israel's going too far. Quiet. Let me. No, you didn't. Your point stopped. Listen.
All right, don't talk over each other. Elika, let Dave respond, and then you respond to him.
I listened to the garbage you had to say.
Let him respond, then you reply.
Let me get in now.
But I didn't say no response.
All right, but stop talking.
Lady, let me just save you all the time in this debate. You wanted to debate me because I'm so wrong about everything, and I'm so influential, and you wanted to smack it down. It ain't gonna be you, lady. You're not the one who's gonna stop me. This is just ridiculous.
It's lady.
Okay, I'll call you whatever. Oh, okay, good one. Oh yeah, you really smacked down my bad ideas. Anyway, Piers, again, all they have.
You're too stupid to realize it. You're too stupid to realize how bad your ideas are.
There you go. That's the argument you got. Anyway, can I talk now?
Sure.
Okay. So Piers, as always, it's just the same thing on repeat here, right? So the defense is to go, but look, the motivation of Israel is pure. The motivation of everybody else is evil. Even though obviously what Israel is doing is objectively torturing women and children to death as they die with their bones crushed under rubble. But also, Piers, don't let it mess with you that at the highest levels of the Israeli government, they've kind of told you what their motivations are here. I mean, the South African case that they brought to the International Court of Justice was like 90% just direct quotes from Israeli leaders. The prime minister himself referred to them as Amalek when talking to the military. You got the finance minister, the defense minister bragging about how nobody's getting any food for a 3-month period, bragging that not 1 ounce of grain will get into Gaza. I mean, I'm sorry, this is obviously terrorism. It borders on genocide. It's horrifically wrong. And for you to use your example of saying like, oh, this is what I'm saying is that a guy who robs a store and a cop who comes to stop them are committing the same act because they're pointing a gun at each other. Yeah, but of course, in that example, they're right. But in that, no, that's what you said. That's what you said about my point. And it was really dumb. Because in that example, there aren't innocent people being slaughtered. Yeah, it kind of is. If there were,
it would still be different. Okay, so
Elika, let me ask you a question, which is this. Are you comfortable with everything that Israel's done in the last 3 months?
No, I've always said that there should be dual criticism, and that's exactly what my problem has been this whole time. Everybody's criticizing Israel, which is fair, but why isn't anybody criticizing the reason why Gaza looks like this? Because Hamas has decided to embed itself.
They are, though. I mean, I couldn't have been more critical of Hamas going back 20 months. I mean, I still am now. I think they're a despicable terror group. Well, they're a despicable terror group who committed one of the worst terror attacks of modern times. I mean,
your earpiece maybe wasn't working for the whole first 5 minutes of this, where me and Piers both agreed that the previous guest was ridiculous to downplay Hamas's crimes and that they had committed horrific acts of terrorism.
Elika.
What I was responding to in terms of what Piers said to me, he was talking about why is it that we can do targeted military strikes in Iran, but we've decided to entirely desecrate Gaza. And my response was that, not saying that it was right, but I'm saying that when Hamas embeds itself in all of Gaza, it is going to result in ruin. And it reinforces the point that I've been making this entire time, not just since October 7th, but for the past 3 years that I've been talking about terrorist regimes, which is that they bring mass death and destruction everywhere they go.
Well, that is true. I agree with that. But I also know that Israel, through Mossad, have supposedly the most sophisticated, experienced intelligence operation in the world. And it was brilliantly seen with the Hezbollah pager attack. It's been brilliantly identified by the way they managed to identify where all the military leaders and nuclear scientists and nuclear sites were going to be in Iran for Israel to attack. From a purely military perspective and intelligence perspective, Israel did an extraordinary job, both with dealing with Hezbollah and the Iranian regime. However, it does just beg the obvious question. Why were they not able to foresee in any way, apparently, that Hamas were going to spend 20 years spending the billions of dollars which Netanyahu had encouraged them to have, because he believed in divide and rule with the Palestinian Authority, that they had these billions of dollars and were spending it on creating one of the world's biggest underground tunnel systems to operate from. And then how did Mossad not know anything about 3,000 Hamas terrorists pouring over its border when they're literally on their border and they're guarding it all day long? So I just cannot understand how this could have happened. And then I don't understand why Israel is responding in a way which it's never responded to anything like this in this way before. Why is Gaza? And then you had the Smodrich quotes, Annika, where he brazenly talks now last week on camera that the plan now is to cleanse Gaza of Palestinians. That is ethnic cleansing. That is a war crime.
That's obviously wrong. That's obviously
Good.
wrong.
So we need to agree. We need to agree certain things like that, because honestly, it's important to me. It's like when people don't condemn Hamas, I sort of tune out, because it's like, the last guy, the moment he just said he was proud of what Hamas did, I tune out of him as a credible guest. But if you're prepared to admit, which very, very few pro-Israelis right now will admit, which is that some of this strategy is completely wrong, I think we may get somewhere.
It's so foundational to acknowledge that fact. It is so foundational to say that just because you have the right to defend yourself, it doesn't mean that you have carte blanche. It is so foundational to acknowledge all of these things, to acknowledge the death, the destruction, all of it. This is not what my conversation is about.
Okay.
This is not about has there been damage or destruction or whatever. The whole point of this conversation is that you're making moral equivalencies, and these moral equivalencies blur the distinction between right and wrong, good and evil. Now, you can say that, but some of these actions look like they are evil in themselves, but the entire conversation always goes down to intent. That is what our entire criminal justice system is.
But I don't agree with that. I actually don't agree. You've just said that some of the, unless I'm wrong, you've just said that some of the things Israel's been doing are evil. Right? You've drawn your own moral equivalency. You said both sides are doing... Well, hang on. Both sides are doing evil things. That's surely the point Dave Smith was making.
No, let me tell you why. Let me tell you why it's different. Because there is one side that kills ideology to protect its people, and there is one side that kills people to protect its ideology. That is the difference.
5 of Israel's allies, including the United Kingdom, have sanctioned 2 senior members of the Israeli government. Finance Minister Smodrich and Security Minister Ben-Gvir are accused of inciting extremist violence and serious abuses of Palestinian human rights. Both have called for the aggressive expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Smodrich says that Gaza will be entirely destroyed and that not one grain of wheat should be allowed in. That's genocidal language. And the result is an extraordinary situation in which two of Israel's top ministers are now banned from travelling to countries that Israel counts as friends and allies. The United States, Israel's oldest and most important ally, is rapidly running out of patience too. President Trump might be the only person outside of Israel who can end this war. This week he called Netanyahu to tell him that a ceasefire and a hostage deal are not enough. He expects the war to end. For today's debate, I'm joined by 2 very familiar contributors whose insights we value and respect. Jonathan Conricus is a former IDF spokesman and combat commander. Bassem Youssef is a satirist, a former surgeon, and a figurehead of the pro-Palestinian movement. Both have spoken a lot about October the 7th and the long history of the war and indeed the conflict. So we're going to focus on what's happening now and what needs to happen next. Jonathan will go first. Bassem will respond. We'll try to give both of you equal time and a statement to respond to. So let's get into this. Jonathan Conricus, first of all, your reaction to this pretty unprecedented news that 2 Israeli senior ministers have effectively been sanctioned by some of Israel's closest allies.
Yeah, it puts into question if it really is a close ally. And I think I'm very disappointed. I think it is egregious. I think it's wrong. I think that decision is hypocritical. I think it is unfair and probably impossible standards that are only applied against Israel. And I think it is very unhelpful. And I think that Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the same words, very unhelpful for the UK and a few other countries to gang up against Israel and to do that. I will say that I didn't vote for either of those two ministers, and I probably don't share many of their views and definitely not their language and style of communications. But I will say that they were democratically elected, and that in Israel, which is more than I can say about a lot of people and so-called leaders in the region who are not under UK sanctions, and I think that they represent what their voters feel. Now, without espousing and supporting specifically what you quoted Bezalel Smotrich saying, when it comes to humanitarian aid, I think there's a bit of irony here that he is now sanctioned after he himself, as Minister of Finance, signed the budget that pays for humanitarian aid that is now being delivered to Gazans. As far as I know, more than 14 million meals have been provided by Israel and the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation over less than 2 weeks, directly to Palestinians, without Hamas or their front organization UNRWA being able to touch, contaminate, control, and divert the aid. And I think that is a positive development, welcome. I think that it is late in the game, and we should have done it earlier, but I'm happy that it's being done now. I'm happy on two fronts, because one, there is a need for food to be provided, and two, it undermines the control and the stranglehold that Hamas has over the Palestinian population.
Okay.
And I would also say, under the same, just one last thing, Piers, under the category of hypocrisy, I've read so many tweets and statements by so-called humanitarians who claim to care about food and the humanitarian situation in Gaza. They are the same people who are now saying that this humanitarian effort by Israel isn't enough and that they don't support it. I wonder why they don't support it. And I think that they don't support it because it doesn't support the UNRWA mechanism that is in place, that keeps Hamas in place, and because it is perhaps the beginning of the end for Hamas. And a lot of people have a vested interest in Israel not defeating its enemy.
Okay, Bassem Youssef, your response.
You guys are talking about these two ministers as if this is the exception. I mean, like all of the Israeli cabinets have genocidal language. And Mr. Jonathan, artist on the other side, he's like saying that they represent their constituents, which means the whole society, the whole community is genocidal. This is what they represent. And actually, like I think like we're asking the wrong question. We should be asking, like, instead of what we do, we should start asking, why are we funding this? Why is my tax money, $30 billion to date, went to Israel to buy 2,000 pounds bombs and F-35s to dump Palestinians? Why is your tax money, Piers, is going to the British government to finance this? If Israel wants to defend itself, let it defend itself by itself, not with my money. And also, like, this is like a country it's bragging that this lobby is buying off politicians in America. AIPAC is bragging about 80% of Congress being paid by them. If one politician in the EU, in Britain, in America was paid with bribed by Russian money, oh my God, you're going to have 6-month wall-to-war coverage, foreign interference, democracy, imperial corruption. But with Israel, crickets, complete radio silence. And I brought this, by the way, many times, and it was just like you flow over it, because this is the real question, right? Because you would spend 3 hours talking about if this is a proportionate response, but we'll not talk about 3 minutes. Why is my money? Why is hurricane relief funds in America are going to fund Israel? Also, like, I don't understand the relationship between America and Israel. It's like it's the most effed up situation ever. We're like the world's most pathetic sugar daddy. We give them billions of dollars and they shit on us. Like Mr. Jonathan said, now we're ganging on them. We're not helpful. Dude, we gave you $30 billion to bomb children and it's not enough for you. Like, I mean, at least when you pay a dominatrix, you know that you're getting fucked. But this is just America having a public humiliation king while getting fucked, and they call this foreign policy. They are arresting American students on American soils for protesting Israeli war crimes. What the hell, man? This is like your crack whore making you beat your children for calling her what she is, a whore. And this is what really boggles me in America. The right and the left, they fight each other tooth and nail over gun control, education, minorities' rights, healthcare, DEI. But when it comes to Israel, everybody competes to be Israel's favorite bitch. Republicans hate handouts unless it's for Israel. And Democrats, they love human rights unless it's for the Palestinians. I mean, this is a Delulu state. You guys are Delulu. You are Delulu. Like, I came here today to witness for myself how someone can lie so shamelessly. The guy is like a human pinball machine. Every question lies on him, ends on Hamas. It's like a magic 8-ball with one answer. Hamas. Yani, at least flat earthers, they make things interesting. You guys are boring. You are like the same thing. I left all of this. I left the media because of this. I come back. It's a freaking Groundhog Day. Every day, the same question, the same thing. Dude, nobody believes you. You are liars.
Okay.
Nobody believes you.
Okay, let me just say, well, since you haven't been on media for a while, Bassem, you probably would have noticed that I've become quite unpopular, actually, with the pro-Israeli lobby, because I've been increasingly critical of Netanyahu and his government and believe they have...
Because if you're not your doormat,
That's
if you're not
entirely accurate,
they will not do it. Yeah.
Well, okay, but, you know...
Piers, that's
all right,
not
but
entirely
that's just...
accurate.
You may have missed that. But, Jonathan Conricus, your response to what Bassem Youssef said?
Well, you know, I could choose to respond to many things. I could respond to your foul language. I could respond to how low you speak. I could respond to your nonsense rhetoric. And basically, I think it shows that you've been out of the business for a while because you're repeating, regurgitating a lot of stuff that's really old. I think you should update your poison. You should get an updated version of the talking points against Israel. All of the things you said they're quite low level. They're not very impressive. I've heard it a million times, and it's quite childish. It's interesting for me to hear that from an Egyptian. Last time I checked, Egypt is the second largest beneficiary of American money. And if you reportedly really care about your tax money, then have you asked yourself why the US is providing so much money to Egypt and what the US gets in return? And what I would like to know is, why is the Arab Egyptian Republic refusing to receive refugees, their Arab Muslim brothers from Gaza, and why are they so inhumane and cruel and preventing poor Gazans from escaping a war zone? Last time I checked, the only war where civilians have been prevented from leaving, escaping, fleeing a battlefield is this war. I cannot remember, and maybe you as a comedian can think of another war where civilians were prevented from a neighboring non-hostile state to flee the war. I cannot remember any such thing. And I think that the country where you come from has a lot to answer from. I know that you're more confident in bashing Israel and talking conspiracy theories and AIPAC this and that and all of the other nonsense that you regurgitated. But let's talk about Egypt. Let's talk about their responsibility. Let's talk about US funds to Egypt. Let's talk about their cruelty. Let's talk about how they have prevented humanitarian access to Gaza. Let's talk about the fact that they have built the world's biggest wall that dwarfs the Chinese wall and all Israeli security walls between Gaza and Egypt. Why did they do that? Out of Muslim compassion? Out of care for humanitarian rights of their Arab brothers? No. Because they want the poor Gazans in, and because they know that programs like this one and other programs will support Hamas propaganda and will blame Israel for what's happening, when in fact Gazans should have been evacuated out of Gaza in the second or third week of the war. We would have defeated Hamas quickly and with far fewer
all right, but just to be clear, Jonathan,
casualties.
Just to be clear, programs like this one, hosted by me, which is the point you're making, I think, I'm afraid I take exception to a 3-month policy of starvation of a populace that's been relentlessly bombarded that includes so many children. That's my problem. And I think that the war aims, the stated war aims of Israel at the start of this, which was to eliminate Hamas, and to get the hostages released, neither of those things have happened. All that's happening is more and more civilians are getting killed in the process of going after the Hamas terrorists. And you've taken also, as a government, to starving already impoverished children. And I just find that unconscionable, as indeed, by the way, do two former Israeli prime ministers who've gone on record as saying that. And there was a very powerful piece by a Jewish writer, Thomas Friedman, in today's New York Times, saying Israelis, diaspora Jewry and friends of Israel everywhere need to understand that the way Israel is fighting the war in Gaza today is laying the groundwork for a fundamental recasting of how Israel and Jews will be seen the world over. And he doesn't mean in a good way. He means in a very bad and serious and potentially dangerous way. So yeah, this program has evolved.
Thomas,
it does
Thomas
stand
has
for
been
that.
campaigning.
Well, I'm going to go to Bassem for his response. But since you brought that up about this program
Piers,
and what it
leveled
represents,
10 allegations against me,
that is what
I don't get to respond.
Okay, well, I'm going to let Bassem respond, but that is my response to what you said. So Bassem.
So let's.
Well,
let's
I didn't,
talk about,
finish
I would
making
love
a
to
coherent
talk about
sentence.
Well,
let Bassem finish first.
I didn't
Piers, but
interrupt you,
okay, by all
please,
means.
so I didn't interrupt you. I didn't interrupt you. All right? You asked me about Egypt. I'll answer you about Egypt.
You didn't,
Egypt
and I appreciate
takes
that.
1/3 of the aid that Israel receives, while Egypt have 10 times the population. Egypt never received $30 billion to murder children and bomb hospitals. Egypt was never allowed to have the privilege of having more than 58 vetoes in the Security Council, right? And also, why doesn't Egypt take Palestinians? This is like someone going into Fifth Avenue, shooting someone in the face, and it's like, why do the neighbors don't bury the body? You're the guys doing the killing, not Egypt. So stop talking about Egypt. Anyways, and I would like to, like Jonathan and his likes, to please stop Zionizing us. Stop the Zionizing. Zionizing, it's a verb, which means to gaslight someone with such shameless, narcissistic, psychopathic audacity that you deny reality to their faces while simultaneously playing the victim, engaging in endless circle debates that go nowhere and displaying a complete loss of empathy and basic humanity. Right? Remember, Piers, why the first video went viral? Because I called Israel a narcissistic, psychopathic behavior that fucks you over and then makes you think it's your fault. Because this is what Israel does. It didn't happen. And if it did, you're remembering it wrong. And if you're not, it's your fault because you're looking into my phone. Narcissists lived in their own made-up reality. They don't share your reality. They live in their own custom-made universe where facts are negotiable and truth is whatever serves them in the moment. And when it comes back and when you corner them, they throw tantrums, accusation, Hamas, anti-Semitism, full victimhood mood. And it's pointless to debate with them, right? Because take him, for example, and the likes of him. You show them a video, it didn't happen. You show them UN reports, these are lies. You mention international law, it's complicated. You get testimonies on the ground from doctors and nurses at Hamas propaganda. We saw it with our own eyes. Your optic nerve is anti-Semitic. Like Israel is like Shaggy. We saw you won the hospital. It wasn't me. We saw you killed the children. It wasn't me. Dude, your war crimes are documented. Hamas propaganda. Also, it wasn't me. There is no point of debating gaslighters. We have 4K videos, satellite imagery, and your own soldiers posting on TikTok bragging about killing children. But of course, yeah, the entire planet is having a mass hallucination, right? This is like Israel has the same credibility as a Ponzi scheme. Right? This is what I'll give you an example how Delulu is Israel, right? Israel calls itself, I mean, he was in the IDF and he tell you, the most moral army in the world. Also, they call themselves the most vegan army in the world. So Jonathan here is representing an organization that is both vegan and genocidal. Yani we will not eat chicken, but inshallah, we will bomb a hospital and barbecue it. Do you see how fucked up is this? This is like calling Jeffrey Dahmer the most vegetarian serial killer in history. Right.
Okay.
And this is but one more thing. Does any army in the world call itself moral? This is another trait of narcissistic psychopathic behavior because they project to the world the exact opposite of who they are. If they lie, they brag about being honest. If they cheat, they brag about being faithful. And if they are cheap, they brag about being generous. And if they are criminal, genocidal, they brag about being moral, the most moral actually.
Okay. I mean, look, I would take away from that something that you and I, Jonathan, have reached agreement about, which is it remains appalling to me that international media and journalists are not allowed into Gaza to examine the veracity of all these claims from an independent perspective, because that would go a long way to answering the complaint, which is completely valid by Bassem, that every time there is any kind of incident which reflects badly on Israel, the immediate response is to shed doubt over it ever happening or to say it's Hamas propaganda or whatever. And the reason for that is because the Israeli government knows that there are no independent journalists from outside allowed in to ascertain the facts. And of course, nearly 200 Palestinian journalists have been killed by airstrikes. So there is an awful. On that, I know that Jonathan, you and I think agree about that, right? I think it would be in Israel's interest and the world's interest if they simply lifted the ban on journalists and allowed independent journalists to do their job and verify all these things that are happening. I mean, you agree, right?
Yeah, I remember having this conversation with you, and I think it was that little Canadian Jew, self-hating Jew, I forgot his name, who repeated the same lies or the same story about media. And I remember telling you, Piers, that I will personally see you in the Gaza Strip. If you decide to come over, since you have been campaigning on this, and since I think that you have a point, I don't think that what you say is true. And I don't think that all of the allegations that you make, some of them are directly unfounded. But
which ones, out of interest? Which allegations are unfounded?
What you said in the beginning of 3 months, the last
3 month blockade, food and aid,
time to respond. 3 months of starvation. That is nonsense. That is absolute nonsense.
Well, you had a 3 month blockade, right? I mean, there was a amount. Well, hang on, Jonathan.
So let me explain. You asked, you did your monologue.
You say nonsense, but there was a three. You don't keep talking.
And if you'll
allow
me to
there was a 3 month blockade of food
Piers.
and aid. You accept that?
Yeah, Piers. Listen. We both know that I cannot be in a shouting contest with your mic with this situation. So I'm not even going to try.
Of course you can. But you can't just dispute there was a.
No, I'm not.
You have to agree there was a 3 month blockade.
I will tell you what there was. There was, before that, a ceasefire which was violated by Hamas when Hamas refused to turn over hostages and to agree to the deal that was presented by the US with Egyptian and even Qatari support. Hamas refused to hand over those hostages and to continue the ceasefire. The ceasefire was ended and Israel returned to fighting. Now, during the ceasefire, Israel literally pumped the Gaza Strip with international aid. Not because we very much wanted to do so, because those were the conditions of the aid.
What happened when the ceasefire ended?
Administration.
What happened when the ceasefire ended?
When the ceasefire ended, Israel stopped allowing that because fighting continued.
And Israel killed 300 people. It was reported the next day, Israel killed 300 people.
But here is the really important part.
I don't expect even you to try and explain they were all terrorists, right? So they killed 300 people the next day, and you launched, and the Israeli government launched a 3 month blockade of food and aid. These are simple facts.
And Israel did indeed stop providing aid to its enemy and to the population there. But it was not a tactic of starvation. Nobody is starving in Gaza. Nobody is starving in Gaza.
So why are they risking death
after the Gaza Strip was
each other to get to food?
With international aid, Piers, after the Gaza Strip was flooded with aid and when UN warehouses couldn't even meet the capacity and when truckloads were delivered from the Israeli side and weren't even taken by the UN on the other side and by their Hamas counterparts, that is when Israel said, okay, we're also going to go back to fighting and nobody is starving in Gaza. That is a complete fabrication. And if you speak about 4K evidence and all of that, Bassem mentioned a lot of nonsense, but you speak about evidence. You know how many videos I've seen of fat Gazans, of fat Hamas fighters, of overweight Gazans? Do you know how difficult it is for an Israeli to believe that Gazans are starving when I see in social media that there are open hotels, that the markets have fresh produce, and that I know the amount of food that is coming into the Gaza Strip? So allow me to question and doubt everything what you say. Ya Habibi, allow me to question and doubt everything that you say, Mr. Comedian Bassem. And because you don't have standing, you don't have knowledge, you're outdated, you're repeating. I'll give you credit for saying catchy things and sound bites. You do that very well. But in terms of actually knowing what's going on in Gaza, you have no clue. You're a complete uneducated person who is just regurgitating monologues and catchy names and popular culture at
And you
Israel,
don't think
but
the
you have
branding
no clue what's
Gazans a
going
bunch
on
of
in
fat
Gaza.
people who aren't starving? You think that's not a catchy little phrase
This is the
to get
funniest
attention?
shit I've ever heard.
I mean, come on.
Like,
Really, Jonathan? You're reduced to saying that all Gazans are so overfed, they're all fat. Come on, man.
Send them treadmills and pelotons.
Piers, the only really skinny people that I've seen in Gaza, you know who they were? They were Israeli hostages that were starved by Hamas. They are the only skinny people, malnourished and tortured people that I've seen coming out of Gaza. They are the only ones that have been really malnourished. All the other ones that I've seen, and believe me, I have watched hours and hours of footage of Gaza that none of you have taken the time to watch, and I've seen
Well, let
a
the
lot
journalists
of
in
healthy
then.
and some
Why don't
of
you
them,
let
yes,
the journalists
overweight.
in to verify whether
And
there are
I've said to
actually
you, Piers,
any starving
come.
people in Gaza?
If
Why
you-
don't you, if you're so right and all the Gazans are incredibly fat from all the extra food they've been eating.
No, that's not what I said.
You did,
Piers,
actually.
I didn't
then
say
why
that.
don't you
I
let the
didn't say that.
journalists...
No, I didn't say that. I said
let
that
the
I've
journalists
seen
in,
fat
and we can
Gazans.
analyse just
Yeah.
how many fat people in Gaza there are who've been overfed in the last few months.
And we can
Bassem,
analyse how many times UN organizations have weathered
The thing is, Jonathan, you can say what the hell you like, but we can't verify it, can we? You won't let journalists get in to verify it.
I'll say it now. I'll say it now a fourth time, Piers. I will invite you personally. I am inviting you personally a fourth time, and I've said it. I think 3 or 4 months ago when I was before that on your show. I said, Piers, I agree that you should be able to get access to it because you have been campaigning.
And you would let
if
me go
anybody should be
anywhere in
given
Gaza, or would I have to be directed to
I
where
would
you want
accompany
me
you
to
and
see?
make sure that you would get access. Yes.
Yeah.
No, I would make sure that you get in and that you get the opportunity to speak with Palestinians. Yes.
All right. Time to think about this. Time to work out what he got right and wrong first time. And he's hit the ground very hard, running very fast, really to try and send a message. Right, this is the new America. What do you make of it?
Yeah, so first of all, credit to him on both the optics and the action, right? So when a Democrat gets in office, they immediately start saying, our voters have to push us to do the right thing. And then they say, don't push, don't push, don't push. Hey, how about we elect you and you do your goddamn job, right? And for Democrats, that seems to be a really hard ask, right? So that's why I'm so frustrated with my own party. Trump comes in and goes, you want to see something? Boom, here we go, day one. Oh, signing after signing after signing, executive order after executive order. So give him credit for that. Number two, give credit to Susie Wiles, who ran a brilliant campaign and now seems to be running a very tight ship as the chief of staff. Now, when it comes to the actual orders, I disagree with tons and tons of them. Some of them are expected. We're getting out of the Paris Climate Treaty, which is a disaster for us to get out of. But once Trump's elected, that's fait accompli. So it's not like you should be overly surprised by that. The pardons of the violent criminals on January 6th is unacceptable, except for the fact that it was super obvious that he was going to do it, right? And then when he gets to the absurdities like taking away birthright citizenship, I think he does that as kind of a squirrel to distract people and get everybody to focus on that while he passes everything else, because that has no chance. That's wildly unconstitutional. And by the way, I would hope that MAGA would realize things that are unconstitutional and go, wait, we're supposed to love this document. I can't have you going outside the Constitution and outside the law.
Okay, Andrew, your response.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of problems here. So the first problem is these were not violent criminals who were released. These were political prisoners who were released. What happened is there was no fair application of the law whatsoever. These guys were being tried in D.C. There was a political witch hunt. We have more evidence every single day which provides for that. And why these guys are busy now complaining and showing us, oh, down here on the border, we have a mom crying because she might be separated from her kid. Nobody's commenting on the fact that we have a ton of families that just got reunited. And on behalf of all of the Wilsons of the world, welcome home. January 6ers, it's guys like this that wanted to put you away in a dark hole, absent due process, and throw away the key. These were not violent criminals. By the way,
well, hang on. Okay, but Andrew, hang on.
Okay.
Let me just stop you there. So I actually interviewed one of the protesters Jacob, who was the QAnon shaman guy. And I also had a Capitol police officer who'd been working that day. And what they both agreed, very interestingly, was that they both condemned the violence against police officers that day. So if you can have one of the protesters who've just been pardoned concede that the violence that was perpetrated by some of the protesters was wrong, unacceptable, and should be condemned, why would you categorize it as non-violent?
Well, I didn't categorize it as non-violent. I said these are not violent criminals, which is how it's being
But if you're
framed.
perpetrating violence against police officers, it is, isn't it?
What? How many? A few? A couple? This guy on May 30th of 2020, the White House was under siege. It was attacked. Over 100 Secret Service agents injured. We had they were burning down stations. This guy said, "Oh, well, Trump had to go hide out in his bunker." Can you imagine if the roles were reversed and Donald Trump came out and was like, "Oh, AOC had to go hide. Oh, these politicians had to go hide." He doesn't care about political violence. The left doesn't care about political violence at all. They'll use it when it's expedient for them. They always do, pointing to a couple of bad actors at this thing and saying all of them have to be thrown away. And, you know, the key thrown away with them is insanity. And no, I don't think so. I think it's a miscategorization to frame all of them as violent criminals. And that's
well,
exactly
they weren't all violent at all. I mean,
that's what he was doing.
Were...
That's what he was framing it, though.
Yeah, no, listen, I don't, and Cenk, I do not agree with that. I don't think all the 1,500 were violent. In fact, we know for a fact they weren't. A lot of them were not convicted of violence.
Yeah, I didn't say that at all. So, look, all right, whatever, dude. So on the Young Turks, we've been super clear about this. And as always, we're the one guys setting people who are fair. You'll see both sides do all this extreme stuff like Andrew's doing. So first of all, the people who went to the speech of Donald Trump, a lot of times they get thrown into this. And I have always said, no, that's not fair. They didn't go down to the Capitol. For the people who went to the Capitol, it's an obvious crime to break into the Capitol. And why were they doing that? They were trying to overturn the results of the election. So you could blah, blah, blah on all your talking points, but it's absurdity. Obviously, they were trying to hurt our democracy. They were trying to steal that election. And were some of them violent? Were all of them violent? No. Were some of them violent? Obviously. We have eyes and ears. So you can do all the propaganda you want, but we just watch the tape of them trying to beat the crap out of the cops. I thought you guys cared about cops. I care about crime. I'm against crime, and you know, and we take heat sometimes from the left because they think that crime is a right-wing narrative and doesn't actually exist. Well, the voters just showed you it does exist, and they're pissed about it. But they're also pissed about it when you go beat up cops for Trump. So look, I'm past it because the American people voted. They put Trump back into office, and that's pretty definitive. I didn't want that, but it happened, right? But if you're going to try to do revisionist history, that these were some patriots who showed up for a picnic, but oh golly gee, there was a Capitol, so they started to bust in and beat the living crap out of the cops, and oh, he lost the election, but oh no, it was stolen, so they go and try to do a coup attempt. I hate it. I think it's a terrible precedent, and I think every time you guys defend it, you sound absurd, and it sounds like overwhelming, ridiculous propaganda.
Andrew?
Yeah, what it's about is a fair application of law. And there has not been fair application of law here. Cenk himself cannot even do fair application of law. At the same time, he says, oh, they're trying to coup and overthrow the democracy. It's exactly what happened May 30th when they were attacking the White House. They were attacking Secret Service agents. They wanted to get in there. And all he could do was whine about how Trump had to get sent to a bunker. Where was his outrage about the coup d'etat? Where was he when Black Lives Matter was burning down cities?
Was no coup
Nowhere.
On May 30th. It was a protest.
He was saying instead, Cenk, I didn't interrupt you once. Do you think he calmed down for me? So anyway, what's going on, very simply, is that he has the revisionist history. While at the same time, the Democrats are saying, you got to stay home and stay masked up. They're telling other people, go outside, burn down cities, make Chaz chop, a nice free independent zone. I don't know how you could say that that's anything other than an insurrection to say that this is now no longer part of the United States government, have your own armed militia there. The entire 9 yards, May 30th, they attack. And this guy says nothing. Suddenly, J6, though, oh my God, they're violent extremists. They're going to overthrow democracy. It's all nonsense. It's not fairly applied. He's never fairly applied it. The law has never been fairly applied to the J6ers. They were tried in D.C., not in front of impartial juries. And here's how our law works. Our law works like this. 1,000 walk free, so one guilty person doesn't spend a day in prison. That is the precedent for our law. That's why they got pardoned, and it's exactly why they should have.
Yeah, and Andrew, on the ending the birthright
Can I
citizenship,
just address
hang
that
on, Czech. I'll
real
come
quick?
to you in a moment. Response on what Czech mentioned also about the ending the birthright citizenship is one of the executive orders. Do you think Trump intends to do that? Because it seems to me he's already won the debate about illegal immigrants who are here are criminals in America.
Yep.
Everyone pretty much agrees they should be sent back, including the million who've already been processed but haven't been deported yet. So all of that seems to be very popular, but there is a lot of anger about the idea that you may end what seems to be a very American thing, the very ethos of the country, this birthright citizenship. What do you feel?
It's a very un-American thing. The 14th, or I'm sorry, this was never, by the way, never set up so that people could come in, have a baby, and then anchor themselves to the child. And that's what's been going on. And it's been going on for years. We know it's been going on for years. This was designed for things like for immigrants who came in legally. They have children here. Of course, those are United States citizens. Nobody's disputing that. What we're disputing is that you can just come in illegally, have a child on American soil, and then try to anchor yourself to that child. That is not in the spirit of what we're even talking about. Of course, Trump wants to end it. It's bad policy across the board. It's always been bad policy across the board. And I hope the Supreme Court, it gets challenged by the Supreme Court so we could get it in front of them so that they can interpret it correctly, because that's not the way this is supposed to be applied.
Cenk?
Yeah, so first let me address what he said, and then I'll come back to this. So look, guys, what happened on May 30th was nothing but a protest. But if they attack Secret Service guys, then they should be arrested. That's a violent crime. I'm principled on both of those things. And in Portland, when they took over a portion of the city, I was against it. Like, well, that's not a thing. You don't get to take over a portion of a city. I was against it when gangs took over apartment complexes and buildings in Colorado. So if Trump stays with things that the American people are in favor of, getting rid of the violent felons that are undocumented here, that's going to be very popular, whether the left likes it or doesn't like it, right? But when he goes too far and he goes to things like birthright citizenship, then people are going to push back. And that's when it gets interesting. Is Trump going to double down and go, no, I'm going to, go to demagogue on this and get you people to hate foreigners coming in, et cetera, and I don't care what the Constitution says, and we're going to change the way America is, and you're no longer an American if you're born here. We're going to judge you based on where you're from, et cetera. That'll be very unpopular. Does he dig in, or does he, as he does sometimes, go, you know what? I gave it a shot, didn't work, and retract. I hope that that's the direction he goes, because this whole look, brother, if you have a problem with a part of the Constitution, you need to go through the right process. You need to go and do an amendment. Like, I want to do an amendment to get money out of politics. But when Biden was in office, I didn't think he should just come in and go, forget what the Supreme Court said. Forget what the Constitution said. Let's go nuts and do whatever the hell we want. That's not how it works.
Well, gee, I never thought about that. I didn't know that we were supposed to go through a process of law for these things, which is exactly what Trump is doing via his executive order, which then hopefully will get it in front of the Supreme Court, which looks like that's what the plan is.
That's part of the legal process.
By the way, just so you know, the interpretation of this, that's what we're really talking about, is the interpretation. Ultimately here, it is not, and you need to agree with me on this, it is not in the spirit that you can come in and have a child here and anchor yourself to the child specifically so that you have some pathway or motivation to citizenship. You say it's not a part of the legal process. Yes, these challenges, getting in front of the Supreme Court, getting in front of various courts, is part of the process. It's been done this way time and time and time again. Also, I reject categorically what you said, just lied to the audience. You called Trump bunker boy, right? He was going down to the bunker during the protest to inspect it. Ha, 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 right? You didn't care at all.
Yeah.
You weren't denouncing political violence. You weren't denouncing these people getting beat up. You didn't care when the violence is on your side like a typical Democrat. You don't care at all, Cenk. You don't care. And you've never cared. The only reason you care now is because you want to kiss.
And I condemn it every time people do violence.
Snake.
Literally
okay,
every
I'll say
time.
snake. But the thing is, Snake, is that you're just trying to kiss the right wing's ass now to get back in with them because the left has categorically rejected you, and that's what's actually happening.
Cenk, is that what's happening?
All right, you amuse me. Yeah, this guy amuses me. So, like, you think calling me Snake is going to somehow win you the debate? Good luck with that childish.
I already won the debate.
Way of going. Oh, you did because you said it. Okay, that, by the way, another great debating tactic. Just saying you won. And second of all, we have 27 million. How many times do I have to say this? 27 million subscribers, 30 billion lifetime views. You're a pimple on my ass. I literally don't even know who you are. So you come in here talking about audience, and you're a snake. Okay, you're a turtle. You're a scorpion.
Audience.
Whatever. Do I win now?
I didn't say anything about audience. What are you talking about? Are you a lunatic?
You did. You just said, "Oh yeah, the left wing's audience has got a problem with him." I know the left wing better than he does.
Oh yeah,
you're
trying to cozy up with right wingers.
Wing.
What were you doing at TPUSA, Sing? Trying to cozy in with right wingers like Charlie Kirk, kissing their ass. You're literally kissing up to them because you want in good, because the left is rejecting center-left policies now. That's what's happening.
Hey, brother,
they either want to go far left or far right.
Okay, listen, brother. As you see me bitch slapping you right here on national airwaves.
The only thing you can bitch slap.
What part of that seems like cozying up? What's the part of that seems like cozying up to the right? I think you're an idiot. I think you love that coup on January 6th. I think you hate our democracy. I think you hate our Constitution. So what part of that is cozying up to the right wing, bitch?
I hate snakes like you who try to get in as good as you can with a weak right like Charlie Kirk when you have weaponized political violence yourself.
Oh, Charlie Kirk is weak right and you're strong right.
At the same time,
Interesting.
at the same time, you say, wait a second. Oh, I can't believe the J6ers coup d'etat. You didn't give a damn. You've never given a damn. We have your words on record. You flip-flopped. You're the biggest flip-flopper on the left. You're known for it. People make fun of you for it because you move positions. You and Anna Kasparian both move positions like a tube of toothpaste.
Oh, Trump! I love Trump! Oh, I love Trump so much.
And all you care about is Trump derangement syndrome. All you have is Trump derangement syndrome.
All right, let me try.
TDS, always on display.
Wait a minute.
Time out.
I gotta say one thing.
You both made your feelings clear.
How can you say that I'm cozying up to the right and say I have Trump derangement syndrome?
All right.
Make up your mind. You're a very poor thinker.
We watched the entirety of his entire first term. You were Russia. He's a colluder. He's evil. He's this and that. And he flip-flopped on that position the second it was politically expedient.
Okay. Let me try and...
None of those things are true.
Let me try and move on to... Guys, let's move on to some policy debate. Andrew, let me ask you, do you feel like the woke worm is in reverse as strongly as I'm sensing it is? And it's specifically just a simple statement from Trump that the policy of the United States will be to recognize two genders, male and female. Well, that's always been the case. It's just incredible that the president of the free world effectively has to make this clear to people who'd lost their minds and believe that actually men can be women and women can be men. But do you feel that this has been a big marker in the beginning of the end of the woke mind virus, as Musk calls it?
No, it's not the end of the woke mind virus. You're going to always have to battle this as definitions change because people need to justify their insane and degenerate behavior in society. So they come up with all sorts of nonsense like this. In this particular case, the trans advocacy groups have done more to reverse any type of progress LGBTQ people in the United States have made in the last 30 years because of what they're trying to do with children and the fact that they don't care that you, as a Christian, do not believe at all that a man can become a woman. So yes, this is whiplash on that. There's going to be a lot more whiplash that's going towards that as people reject categorically what these people have been trying to push on us. You can look no further than what just happened at the inauguration. You have a female bishop. That's an impossibility. That is not Christian at all. You're not allowed to have female bishops. That is satanic. That's literally satanic to have a female bishop come up and say anything. You can laugh, but it is. That's Satan speaking. And the reason you're laughing is because it's true.
Well, Cenk, I'll get you to respond. But first of all, let's play the clip of that bishop, because my objection was actually for different reasons. Let's take a look at it.
I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away. and that you help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here.
So, Cenk, I mean, notwithstanding Andrew's position on the fact there shouldn't be a female bishop, but the fact that she was there on such a big historic moment, delivering a kind of scolding woke lecture with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and their wives sitting there, I just thought it was completely inappropriate. I didn't care who the president was or what the scolding was, but to turn the pulpit into a scolding thing about all America's gay children are going to be running for their lives, I just thought it was completely wrong.
Yeah, Piers, I totally disagree. I loved it, and the reason I loved it is because it's truth to power. And you can say, hey, it's her truth. It's the truth of about half of Americans. It's not necessarily the truth, but at least she's trying to challenge the powerful, and I love that. Look, the reason why a lot of people agree with me is because I challenge the powerful on both sides, on the Democratic side and the Republican side. And that makes the partisans get super mad at me. No, Biden's right about everything. No, Trump's right about everything. No, I love that she spoke for half the country, and she said it right to his face. I wish reporters would do that. And I think a lot of the reporters got the message to be softer on Trump. No. Be harder on the Democrats and the Republicans and the establishment. Be harder on everyone. So do exactly as she did, even though apparently she's Satan. Brother, look, how can I talk to you, man, when you say such ludicrous things? Do you know that like 95% of Americans, when you say that she's satanic because she's a woman bishop, think that you're nuts? Do you at least understand and acknowledge that?
First of all, they don't. You don't understand anything about the Bible, apostolic succession, church history. You don't know anything about these things, Cenk. You have no idea what you're talking about. First of all, she wasn't speaking truth to power. She was speaking subversiveness to goodness. And that's what's actually going on, and that's what Democrats are great at doing. Sure. Yes, it is completely satanic to have inversion. Inversion is when you take what is considered the Christ head, in this case a bishop, and invert it to a woman. That's what you people are great at doing, is inversion. If you looked at the 2,000 years of Christian history, you would understand this, especially church history, going all the way back to the time of Christ and apostolic succession. People, you can, but the truth is that people get all of their ethics and goodness in this nation from biblical ethics and Christian ethics, not from Cenk Uygur thinks it's neat that a chick can do this. It's like, no, that's not part of our ethical standard there. That's not what it is. We don't have an ethical standard based around your version of the woke Bible. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
When you call a respected bishop a chick and satanic.
Respected by who?
It's funny that you don't see that you lose such a giant percentage of the country. And so, like, guys like this make it nearly impossible for a huge part of the country to ever vote for Republicans. Because if you vote for a Republican, you're going to get these ghouls and goblins. And they're going to say, oh, yeah, chicks shouldn't be on bishops, man. It's inversion, dude. It's satanic. You sound insane. To me, honestly, you sound like you belong in a mental asylum. Or when you call people satanic. What the hell does that even mean?
Are always going to
just because she's a woman, just because she's a woman, she's satanic in that role. See, that's exactly why I'm a populist, but I can't be populist, right? When guys like this say such insane things and drive hatred. Drive hatred. You're right, I am power, so keep going.
Remember how you said, I'm massive, I'm huge, I have this massive audience. So I'm here saying, speaking truth to power. You should be all about that. You should be loving the fact that I'm telling you something now, which is true.
Except you're speaking gibberish to power.
It is
is Beelzebub in the room with us right now?
It is an inversion.
Is Beelzebub and Shaitan in the room with us?
I'm sorry. You hate Christianity? You hate Christian ethics, Cenk?
Time out. Piers Morgan Uncensored is proudly independent. The only boss around here is me. If you enjoy our show, we ask for only one simple thing. Hit subscribe on YouTube and follow Piers Morgan Uncensored on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And in return, we will continue our mission to inform, irritate, and entertain. And we'll do it all for free. Independent, uncensored media has never been more critical, and we couldn't do it without you.